everybody, it's me, RunnerEye. You look delightful today, may I say. And today we're going to be talking about the top 10 worst Drag Race episodes of all time. Now, while Drag Race is a great show, I think we all have to admit that it does have its shaky moments. Whether it's just a bad challenge, a boring episode, or a questionable elimination, I think we can all agree that not every episode of this show is Emmy-worthy. So I thought, why not take a journey through the lowest user-rated episodes on IMDb to see what episodes fans believe are the worst Drag Race episodes of all time. We're going to specifically be looking at the worst episodes of the main show, RuPaul's Drag Race, because I think RuPaul's Drag Race All-Stars deserves a list of its own one day. So right before we get into that, let's hear a quick word from today's sponsor, BetterHelp. BetterHelp is the largest therapy platform in the world, and they are on a mission to make therapy more accessible and affordable for everyone. Because one of the hardest parts of therapy is actually finding a therapist who lives in your area, whose schedule lines up with yours. BetterHelp simplifies these variables by hosting a completely online therapy experience, allowing you to tailor your therapy to the way which best suits you, whether it be through video chat, a phone call, or messaging. Even just getting matched with a therapist is simple. All I had to do was fill out this questionnaire about myself and about what areas of my life I was looking for support in, and then bam, I sent it off, and usually you get connected with a licensed therapist within 48 hours, but for me, I was matched with one by the end of the day. And one thing that I opted for, which I think a lot of people out there might appreciate, is that BetterHelp offers LGBTQ+ specialized therapists, which is great because not everyone lives in an accepting area where it might be a little bit easier to find a therapist which is accepting of queer people and also educated in queer issues. But BetterHelp aims to bridge that gap by facilitating matches with professionals who understand the nuances of the queer experience, which honestly I think is absolutely great. So go to betterhelp.com/RunnerEye or choose RunnerEye when signing up to get a 10% discount off your first month with BetterHelp, and allow yourself to get the support that you deserve from the comfort of your own home. Thank you so much to BetterHelp for sponsoring this video. It really does help me out. Now let's get right into the top 10. So at number 10 on the list, we have Season 13's Honey, I Shrunk the Drag Queens, which currently has a rating of 6.2 on IMDb. So in this episode, the queens were tasked with acting in a parody of the 1989 Disney film Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Never in a million years did I ever think I'd be talking about this film on the channel, but here we are. Now, I think there were two main reasons that people really did not like this episode. Number one is that it's just a bad episode. It's just a bad challenge with bad writing, with bad production. It's boring. The story made no sense. Like, why did you choose to do a parody of this film? Like, not to drag the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids stands out there, but like, it's a nice film, sure, but why do we have it on Drag Race? It's just such a random choice. I don't know what about, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids they thought would translate well to a Drag Race parody acting challenge, but here we are. And then reason number two is that I think that people were very tired of this season by the time that we got to this episode. Season 13 was not a highly regarded season, and this was the 14th episode, and we still had 5 people left in the competition, and I think that people were just fed up and wanted the season to be over, and then when they saw it was an acting challenge, especially like this acting challenge, they were just like, fuck this season, they just wanted it to be over, which is so fair. I also wanted it to be over. I don't like season 13 at all. It's funny because a lot of these next episodes, the reason why they're going to be ranked so low is because of various different like controversies, but this is one of the entries on the list which is just on it because of how plain bad it is. So at number 9 on the list, we have season 13's Discomentary, which currently is sitting at a rating of 6 on IMDb. Another season 13 episode, everybody. I'm so excited to talk about this season that I don't like. Now, this challenge was a choreography challenge where the queens had to tell as the story of disco through like different dance routines. And you know what? I actually think that this is a pretty interesting challenge. Like we don't really get that many choreography challenges which aren't, some way like girl group related. So to have like this entire like, documentary, to call it a documentary is like such a stretch, but to have like some sort of kind of like educational aspect about the history of disco and have the queens do disco dances. I actually think it's a pretty cool idea. However, I think the main reason audiences hated this episode was because of the judging. So people's first issue with the judging was that Tamisha Iman was placed in the bottom. Now, if you didn't watch season 13 when it was airing, you might be surprised to hear that Tamisha Iman was a huge fan favorite, which is kind of hilarious now given the fact that she's kind of like nuked her reputation among the fans. So when this fan favorite, this idolized, person on the show was put in the bottom, people were pissed. And people argued that she should have just gotten a free pass, because she was doing everything that everyone else was doing, but with an ostomy bag, and she didn't even do that badly. Then people's second problem with the judging was that Candy eliminated Tamisha. So in season 13, Tamisha and Candy had this short-lasting feud, and during this fight, people took Tamisha's side again because she's a beautiful angel that can do no wrong, and audiences also hated Candy. So when you have the fan favorite going against the person that the fandom has kind of villainized, and then the person who was villainized ends up sending the fan favorite home, you get a low episode rating like this. And then the third problem that people had with the judging was that there was a conspiracy, you could say, that Gottmik was edited out of the entire disco-mentary because she did so bad and the producers didn't want her to go home yet. So all of these different, elements, combined together to create this really poor ranking on IMDb. So at number 8 on the list, we have season 13, Social Media, The Unverified Rusical, which has a rating of 6 on IMDb.
I did it! I invented a new social network, and I'm calling it Fistbook.
Oh wow, a season 13 one again. I'm so excited to talk more about this season. It feels like I'm doing a season 13 recap right now. So this was a Rusical episode where the queens had to participate in a musical allegory where social medias and also the country of Russia were anthropomorphized as real human characters, and it tells the story of social media and how social media came to exist. But it's also cabaret inspired because you have Liza Minnelli's character in Cabaret for some reason. I don't know. Listen, I don't know what they were going for here. I'm not even sure they knew what they were going for here. And also it's kind of similar to the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids parody, where it's why out of every, you get to choose the challenges that you have on your show, RuPaul's Drag Race. Why out of every single idea that exists in the world, why did you choose the social media Rusical? You could have just parodied Little Shop of Horrors would be great. Avenue Q, and then you can see how all the queens adjust to having to do the puppetry, or Mamma Mia, very well-known. You could have just parodied an actual fucking musical. You didn't have to do this Animal Farm retelling of the history of social media. And also it doesn't help that Candy and Simone were in the bottom 2, and Candy, again, the person who was villainized by the fandom and who the fandom hated, was sent home, only to get told last second that, for no reason she was actually going to stay because RuPaul wasn't ready to get rid of her. So that probably just adds to people's bitterness when it comes to this episode. So at number 7 on the list, we have season 15's All Queens Go to Heaven, which has a rating of 6 on IMDb.
God is a woman, and I am. And I'm also a drag queen, and your personal guide to life's ultimate after party.
So this was the third episode of season 15 where the queens were separated into groups and each group had to create a comedic skit centering around this idea of whatever a gay heaven is. You probably remember this episode for Sasha Colby's neck crack. And speaking of Sasha Colby, her group was the only group which did well in this entire episode. So then we get a lip sync between Princess Poppy and Amethyst, and it's a fun lip sync. So that's basically, the main things that happen in this episode. And when I had gotten to this point, I was kind of scratching my head as to why this episode specifically has ranked so low. And then I realized this is the first of the 40-minute episodes on MTV. Basically, for season 15, Drag Race was switching from VH1 to MTV, and MTV decided to cut the episode lengths of Drag Race from 1 hour to 40 minutes. Drag Race fans were really pissed off about this decision because obviously you were getting 1 hour of your favorite show, and now suddenly it's been cut down to 40 minutes. And so, in order to kind of, take out that frustration that people might have been feeling, they decided to review bomb season 15 on IMDb, and this episode episode right here was the first of the 40-minute episodes, meaning that this one took the biggest punch in terms of the user ratings. But if we're taking away like this whole, controversy, I don't even think this episode is that bad. It's actually not, it's not great by any means, but it's definitely not the 7th worst episode of the entire show. So at number 6 on the list, we have season 12's World's Worst, which has a rating of 5.8 on IMDb.
You're a broccoli, but you're in the fruity group.
Well, yes, she's a fierce Brock ally.
So this episode was a comedy improv challenge where the queens had to perform on a parody of American Idol, which in itself I actually think is a pretty good idea. But the problem is each queen was forced into a group and they were given pre-made scenarios and characters that they had to act out, which kind of limited their creativity, so they couldn't actually come up with like a funny idea on their own. So then when people were assigned to pretend that they were fruits and vegetables, not a single person on the cast could refuse. So the challenge itself is just kind of bad, and most people kind of bombed it anyway. But I think what kind of solidifies this episode's low ranking is that the winner of the challenge was someone who was disqualified and edited out of the entire season because of abuse allegations that they had admitted to. So what we're left with is an episode with a terrible challenge where most queens performed really badly, and the person who won the episode was someone who did something so bad that they had to be edited out of the season. Yeah, so not a good mix. So at number 5 on the list, we have season 14's Snatch Game, which currently has a rating of 5.8.
Would you ever do a sequel to E.T.? What would it be called?
E.T. Phone My Home.
Okay.
Now, this episode being on the list is no surprise for anyone. This is universally regarded as the worst Snatch Game of all time. It was a Snatch Game that was so bad that every single person who participated in it, except for one, ended up in the bottom, meaning that 7 out of 8 contestants had to lip sync for their life because of this challenge. I've talked about this before in my Snatch Game rankings, but I think that the bombing of this Snatch Game was a pre-planned thing by production to have like this big, moment and set up the next episode of the Lollapalooza. So even though I don't think RuPaul was necessarily, playing ball with the other queens as much as he normally is during the Snatch Games, I can definitely still admit this is a weaker episode of the series, I agree. Because in an episode that is trying to make a spectacle about how bad the queens did, it doesn't, it was never going to be ranked highly. Also, the episode not having an elimination or a lip sync, I think does hurt it too. So at number 4 on the list, we have season 10's Evil Twins Challenge, which currently has a rating of 5.8.
The person that I do not think is a star in this lineup is Miss Cracker or Miss Crumbs.
Now, going into this video, this was one of the episodes which I knew would be on the list because this is one of the most infamous challenges of all time. So in this runway challenge, the queens had to present 2 characters. The first character being them at their best self, and the second character being their inner saboteur, which represents their darker side, their insecurities, and their fears. And if this challenge was just purely a runway challenge and it was just all based on aesthetics and you had to come up with those 2 runways, I don't think it would be anywhere near as widely criticized as it is. But I think the main problem comes from the fact that the queens are required to write monologues for each character, where the best self character has to talk about all the things that they love about themselves, and the darker inner saboteur character has to talk about why every single thing that you love about yourself is actually incorrect. You shouldn't love yourself. You are a terrible, horrible person, and you deserve to be put in every single saw trap known to man. And as you can imagine, this brings a really negative, dark, energy to the episode, because the episode basically forces the queens to talk about all of the things that they don't like about themselves live on television. And it gets even worse when the queens are encouraged to speculate about what the other person's worst qualities and weaknesses are.
My least favorite is that you over-explain everything.
Yeah. A bad quality of yours is you're under emotional. You don't show a lot of depth.
She refuses to show
like
emotion.
a robot.
And then, even in the walkthrough when RuPaul is, coming around, seeing how the queens are getting on, he, chastises Aquaria for not having, dark enough or toxic enough insecurities. It's so strange.
That's kind of a sort of sanitized voice. That voice has got to be darker than that, isn't it? Isn't it saying, you think you're something?
And then on the runway, they do, this really weird, parent trap type thing where they're pretending that there's like, two of the same person on the runway and that the characters are up there together and they're like interacting with each other. It's strange. And then to make matters worse, we have RuPaul, who asked the instigative question of who should go home tonight and why, and they are encouraged to do it in their darker evil personas. So then when you get to Asia O'Hara, she decides to play into the character. In her evil persona, Asia O'Hara like rips into Miss Cracker. I mean, it's not even, she didn't rip into her that much, to be 100% honest. But when you see that someone is very insecure, and then you are like forced to kind of like be mean to her in your evil persona, and then that person who is insecure takes what you said in your evil persona as like fact and takes it as like you weren't even playing into your character, that was just you. It causes like this really like weird blurred lines between what's reality and the character. So after an entire episode of people dunking on her, Miss Cracker gets eliminated. It's just a really dark and uncomfortable episode where they were clearly trying to kind of like capitalize on the kind of like trauma of the contestants, and then it made a really bad episode. It's one of the again, like, it fits the list. It's one of the worst episodes of all time. So at number 3 on the list, we have the season 13 finale, which has a rating of 5.5.
America's next drag superstar is Simone.
Now, this is a really puzzling placement for me personally. While I don't think this finale is great or anything, I don't think that it deserves to be number 3 on the worst Drag Race episodes of all time. Like, there's some really phenomenal runways, probably some of the best runways we've ever seen on the show. The lip syncs are fine, but the winner of the overall season is really deserving. Like, is it a great episode? Not really. Would I skip this on a rewatch of season 13? Yes. But is it the 3rd worst episode ever? No, it's not. Not even by a long shot. Honestly, I think there's 2 main reasons this is ranked so low. Number 1 being that people absolutely despise the lip sync for the crown format. And then reason number 2 is that I think that people were just tired of this season. Like, this was the 17th episode of a season that not that many people liked that much. So yeah, I don't particularly like this episode. However, this being ranked the 3rd worst episode of all time is absolutely insane to me. So at number 2 on the list, we have season 11's Bring Back My Queens, which has a rating of 5 on IMDb.
Meh. Silky Nutmeg Ganache. Shantae, you stay.
Now, this was the makeover episode of season 11 where they brought back previously eliminated contestants to get made over by the queens who were still in the competition. Now, even though I don't love this episode, season 11 is my least favorite season of all time, so I don't really like any episode of that season, but I don't think that this is the 2nd worst episode of all time. This is a very forgettable makeover. It's pretty hard to remember literally anything that happened in this episode except for the lip sync, and I think that that's where most of the controversy around this episode is centered and why it's ranked so low. So Nina West finds herself in the bottom and is eliminated. And what's important to know about Nina West is that she was a huge fan favorite when season 11 was airing. So when she ended up in the bottom and was sent home, there was going to be outrage no matter what. And outrage about your favorite getting sent home equals episode bad. They teach you that in like early level maths. Like, if Fave is eliminated on Drag Race, it equals to a bad episode. You definitely can't have any like sense of objectivity online. Like, you have to rate solely by bitterness. That's like how IMDb ratings work, apparently. So it was kind of the exact same scenario as the Candy versus Tamisha, that it was the Silky being the villainized person of the season being against the fan favorite, which was Nina West. And then, both of them lip synced. Guess who stays? It's Silky. And then the fan favorite was sent home. This lip sync is like notoriously bad, where both Nina and Silky did awful. And they even did so bad that RuPaul says this after the lip sync.
Meh.
So I'm guessing because of, all the outrage around this judging and a fan favorite going home and the person that people didn't like staying, it got a really low rating on IMDb. So at number 1 on the list, we have, drumroll, the season 13 reunion with a rating of 4.2 on IMDb.
Speaking of sickening, bring back my girls.
Wow, look how gorgeous you are.
So, according to IMDb, this is the worst Drag Race episode of all time. And fun fact, this is the 4th episode from season 13 on the list. Season 13 almost took up half of the entries on this list, which is hilarious. Now, I think people hate this episode because it was supposed to be a reunion. It's literally titled a reunion, but none of the queens actually reunite during this episode. And that was extremely disappointing for a season that was filled with a lot of drama, especially between Candy and Tamisha. People wanted to see a Candy versus Tamisha in the reunion. They wanted to see both of them hash out their drama, and they wanted to kind of get closure for their fight. And then when we got to the reunion episode, we didn't get one, and none of the queens reunited, and it was actually just a recap episode of the season. People were really disappointed. So basically in this episode, we get one-to-one interviews with the queens, and the queens basically just recap their story on the show. And then we get to see a self-produced lip sync number from the queen. And that's really it. And it just does that for every single cast member. And what adds salt to the wound is that this entire chunk of the episode that we just, are hearing about stuff that we've already seen previously on the season is so boring. Like, this episode is longer than the normal episodes of Drag Race. It's 1 hour and 22 minutes long. It's literally as long as a feature-length film, and you're basically just having someone recap stuff that you've already seen. It's kind of like this video if you think about it, because I'm just recapping episodes you've probably already seen, which is, that's a nice little parallel. The only good thing about this episode, in my opinion, is the, lip sync assassin showdown between Lala Ree and Denali. But other than that, this episode is so forgettable. It's just a filler episode. It's like, and it's not even a good type of filler. It's like a bad filler. It's a filler that some queen going on All Stars would inject into her lips. Do I agree with it being the worst episode of all time? Maybe. It's definitely the most boring episode of all time. I'll give it that for sure. So those are the top 10 worst episodes of all time according to IMDb users. Be sure to tell me your most hated Drag Race episodes in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and comment. It really helps me out. And most people who watch me aren't even subscribed, which is crazy because you could just hit that subscribe button for free and then get notified about cool, fun content just like this. I have a Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok if you want to go check me out over there. I also have a Patreon, which has an extended version of this very video, as well as other videos that I've done in the past. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye. Thank you so much to every single one of my patrons: Craig Blythe, Brony RuPaul, Valerie with Love, Jabroni, Giovanni JPEG, The Flame Chaser, Cat Chat, Michael, Planet Daniel, Jamie James Bradshaw, Nico Montano, Ravi Kasari, Eve, Dip, Oliver Wyatt, Giovanni Vicari, Yoon Wyatt, Biko Pop, Matt F, and Tone. You are the most beautiful people to ever exist. It is scientifically, that is a scientific fact. You are the most beautiful people to ever exist. It is backed up by science. It's backed up by me because I said it. So